Welcome to Scorched Earth. In the last video we spoke about what the shadow is and how it's formed. If you haven't seen that, I would recommend that you go back and watch it, because it lays the groundwork for what we talk about next, right? Gives it some context. I left off with this idea of the subconscious signpost, and in this video we're going to dive into what exactly that is. I'm talking about what Jung called psychological projection, right? And this is a term for the act of projecting or undesirable feelings or emotions onto someone else, rather than admitting to or dealing with those unwanted feelings ourselves. It's a defense mechanism that deflects the anxiety that rises in us when we're faced with something that we've chosen to disavow in ourselves. It's primal recognition and a subconscious reaction of panic. It's an internal bait and switch, saying to yourself, look over there at that shitty thing that they're doing and absolutely do not think for a second that I would do that. Projection and all the judgment that it's rooted in causes an internal charge, right? An internal friction. It cements this process of othering and feelings of separation. And for those of you who think, well, I don't do that, I would be able to tell if I was doing that. Know this: you will never accidentally trip over yourself projecting. Doesn't happen. The human mind is complex, and remember that your entire identity is constructed in such a way so as to avoid confrontation with your own faults or weaknesses. It's the shadow is a direct and opposite representation of an individual's ideals of themselves. Anything that undermines you as the hero in your own story will be fiercely resisted by your ego. Jung said, let me get it right, projection is one of the most common psychic phenomena. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves, we discover in our neighbour, and we treat him accordingly. Now, this is something that it took me a long time to understand, mainly because I projected so fucking hard in every direction of my existence that it was almost impossible to find an example of me not doing it. My shadow throttled me for a very long time. Anyway, the point that Jung was making there in that quote was not that your neighbour is an awful person, but that you are primed to reject in them the same things that you have rejected in yourself, regardless of whether that is rational or reasonable, right? Seems obvious, right? The natural corollary of that is that if that priming were removed, so too would the strength of your reaction that you had to your neighbour's behaviour. It just wouldn't bother you in the same way, because it doesn't trigger a shadow response in you. You don't have to be psychic or a witch or a Jungian psychologist to be aware of the way that one's deepest insecurities might as well be painted on a banner and strung between two buildings, because you've all witnessed it in other people. Projection is an externalization of shadow traits, right? A way of protecting yourself from any kind of identification with them by literally casting them onto people around you. It's not possible to repress, ignore, and avoid something so hard without maintaining a subconscious vigilance to its presence. Otherwise, you would accidentally trip over yourself projecting, and we don't. Instead, it gets bounced onto people that we feel in some way have threatened by. Pointing out their flaws, real or imagined, stops us contemplating our own and sees us employing a confirmation bias in our assessment of our behaviours. It always involves the judgment of others, whether to make us feel superior to someone else or as a way of keeping ourselves feeling small and inferior compared to other people. Most importantly, though, it's a crooked perceptual lens that shifts responsibility away from us for all sorts of things, and it can create quite a warped view of how we perceive our behaviour and the behaviour of others. Yeah? What we call civilized consciousness has steadily separated itself from the basic instincts. But these instincts have not disappeared. They have merely lost their contact with our consciousness and are thus forced to assert themselves in an indirect fashion. This may be by means of physical symptoms in the case of a neurosis, or by means of incidents of various kinds, or by unaccountable moods, unexpected forgetfulness, or mistakes in speech. Modern man protects himself against seeing his own split state by a system of compartments. Certain areas of outer life and his own behaviour are kept, as it were, in separate drawers and are never confronted with each other. Get some water. So let's start broad and work our way down, right? Celebrity gossip culture is a perfect societal example of projection, right? A beautiful, slim female model is going to find herself absolutely torn apart, right, by the public. Not because she's somehow failed in her vocation to be the perfect human clothes horse, but instead because her very image makes other women feel shit about themselves, right? They feel shame at their physical form because the advertising industry, whose, literal raison d'etre is to brainwash them into thinking that their value is rooted in the way that they look, spends millions of pounds every year manipulating your insecurities. Bombarding women with this idea that if they lost a stone in weight and they could get rid of their wrinkles, that life somehow would suddenly be better and that they would love themselves. That spending £100 on a tub of miracle, anti-wrinkle cream or £6,000 on liposuction is going to instantly fix the bit of their psyche that is sad, and it's nonsense. And not least because obesity is a symptom, not the cause of emotional distress. Advertising exists to exploit your psychology so that you give them your money, full stop. The insecurities come from allowing yourself to emotionally participate in a cultural system that tells you, to value the wrong attributes. And no one can make you feel shit about yourself unless you consent to feel that way. In recent years, we've seen a huge kickback against this, but it seems to be the default for this epoch that we're living in, that the pendulum has swung violently to the other extreme. And now, as a projection of insecurities, skinny shaming is a legitimised societal behaviour, and there exists a movement that is venerating the morbidly obese. I've seen umpteen examples of situations where an overweight person has been justifiably criticised for something entirely unrelated to their size, and the response is that the critic must just be fat phobic, and that's the end of the discussion. On the other hand, in the same situation, I've seen skinny people dismiss justifiable criticism because they're just jealous about the way I look. Hold up, people. Maybe you have just been acting like an ass. Like a phobia is defined as an excessive and overwhelming fear that results in avoidance or extreme distress. The nomenclature is completely wrong, and deliberately so. It's designed to shut down discourse and deflect away from the painful issue. And this is pure projection. Projecting all sorts of negative judgment into someone else's psyche, and then most importantly, reacting to what they have projected there, rather than the reality of the situation, which might well be something altogether different. But in this particular example, this can only happen because that person on a deep subconscious level is judging themselves. As challenging as a notion, as an action that it can be to truly know and embody this, no one can make you feel any kind of emotion without your consent. In any event, like witnessing someone's projection is like a wide open door to their deepest insecurities, and it shows you what that person judges themselves over, you know. Another cast iron signpost of the shadow is the act of virtue signalling, right? And the Cambridge Dictionary defines it as the popular modern habit of indicating that one has virtue merely by expressing disgust or favour for certain particular political ideas or cultural happenings, right? Now, I wouldn't necessarily agree that it is a purely modern happening, but its occurrence has certainly been amplified to the extreme by the phenomenon of social media in the last decade, right? It's signalling moral superiority by a conspicuous show of values for the benefit of other people, right? It's a vacuous gesture that is supported neither by consistent behaviour nor by facts. And it's undertaken simply to signal to the rest of the world that one is a good person. For the social status points and nothing else. Companies do this all the time, right? All the time. It's a cynical and insincere ploy, often aimed at the younger demographic, designed to make them spend their money with them rather than the competition, you know, by tapping into what is emotionally important to those customers. You know, a certain ice cream company did this a few years ago, right, as a way to peacefully resist the Trump administration's regressive and discriminatory policies and build a future that values inclusivity, equality and justice for people of colour, you know, women, LGBTQ community, the refugees and immigrants, right? Outstanding position. Whatever the colour of your politics, we surely can all get behind any sentiment that it looks to help marginalised people achieve equity. But at the same time, their parent company marketed and sold skin bleaching creams to women in India. You know, the signal of the company didn't match the action. And buying the ice cream was a gesture that didn't make a shred of difference to the real lives of marginalised people. You know, look behind the signal, whether it's from people or from companies, and see if there's any substance to it. You know, as a point of reflection, consider if perhaps you've done it at times, and if you have, why? You know, just as an aside, the act of pointing out to other people that they are virtue signalling can be somewhat of a virtue signalling trap in and of itself. So, like, try not to fall into that. So, let's bring these examples down to people level because, you know, obviously they do it too. And by now, you possibly have half a dozen examples in your head of people that you know that do this on the regular. You know, that bloke from down the pub who posts constantly on social media that, you know, capitalists are scum and we should embrace communism. But he's all the while, he's doing it on a device that costs, you know, 2.5 times the monthly wage of the Chinese factory worker who made it, you know. The vegan from number 27 who posts videos of herself, you know, decrying as morally inferior anyone who eats meat, but that you know for a fact often gets a bacon butty on the way to work from Greg's, you know. Without straying too far into the type of topics that are going to see me suspended from YouTube, the weaponisation of empathy that we have seen employed by governmental behavioural nudge units, and I am looking squarely at you, 10 Downing Street, is replete with examples. You know, there are half a dozen ways that psychology has been used against the citizens of this country in just the last 2 years. But harnessing the power of the virtue signal to cause division and moral outrage amongst the populace has been an absolute stroke of genius. You know, for a subset of British citizens, certain facial adornments have become a perfect way in the UK of signalling your moral virtue. You know, despite a ton of contemporary and historical scientific studies attesting to their inefficiency for the purpose claimed by government, right? But equally, We have a small but vocal subset of those who choose not to don them, who are engaged in fierce counter-signalling too, claiming their moral superiority on social media. The whole thing is a deliberately engineered, divisive shit show. Now, I've no doubt that this position will see me in hot water with some of my viewers, but do you know what? It is what it is. Any behaviour that has as its justification, do it to show others that you are a good person, is not, has not, and will never be science. And it's not going to save any lives. At this point, it's actually a signal of participation in, mass formation psychosis. But we're going to leave that topic for another time. So let's pull it down even further and look at examples that have existed longer than the most recent phenomena, right? Now, this one is somewhat of a trope in shadow work circles, but it's accurate and it happens a lot, so we'll run with it, okay? Imagine a sensitive young boy, right? He's gentle and he's emotional and he doesn't like the rough physical games that the boys at school play. And he happens to have been born to a father who has a hulking great shadow of his own, who was taught early on that being emotional was a feminine trait and completely unacceptable in a man. Yeah? He's uncomfortable at seeing these traits in his son and, visibly disapproves. His words are, aggressive and dismissive. Like, why are you such a girl? You cry over everything. Mummy's boy, right? You should be more like me. Over time, to keep the approval of his father, the boy learns that it's better not to cry when he's upset, right? Better still, he should not even show that he's upset at all. Slowly but surely, right, he detaches from his emotions, right? He stuffs them into this metaphorical subconscious box and he hides it under the bed. By the time he reaches secondary school, right, the process is firmly established, and as his social circle expands, he meets boys who are more like he was when he was younger, right? And he's critical of them because he's associating this connection to emotions as childish and embarrassing, and he'll begin to mock them in front of other teenagers. Yeah. So desperate is he not to identify with this kind of behaviour that he's overtly critical and cruel to anybody who exhibits it, repeating the same refrains of oh, why are you such a girl? Why do you cry over everything to his peers? By the time he hits adulthood, he is completely separated from this side of himself, right? Emotions are a fucking mystery to him, those of his own and other people's. Right? Anything even remotely associated with his own anima is now threatening to him, right? And his entire persona is built around being a man and doing manly things, whatever that means, But so much so that the thought of being identified with anything girly is such a threat that he now responds to it, to even any suggestion of it, with extreme aggression. Right? He's got very little in the way of compassion or empathy, and his relationships are problematic, and he can't see anyone else's perspective on anything. Right? Now, he would actually claim that his emotional repression is actually resilience and that other people are snowflakes, but we know that this is his ego talking, because the reality is that any situation that makes him feel something is terrifying, and he will sabotage it to release himself from the terror of having to deal with his own emotions, hurting himself over and over again in the long run, and other people too. Imagine a different scenario, right? We've got a young girl, right? She's sociable and she loves meeting new people. She's born to a controlling and narcissistic mother whose own shadow was created from, say, an appallingly abusive and neglectful childhood. Hey, the mother has slid sideways into adulthood in pure survival mode. Right? Although she's pretty poor, she really clings to stability and material things because she had so few of them growing up. And it's a conspicuous way of avoiding judgment from other people who would think less of her because she was poor, in her own mind at least, right? She's highly critical of everyone, trusts no one, and cultivates this us and them environment, right? Anyone outside of the home falling firmly into that them camp, right? Their intentions and motivations are always assumed to be malevolent, right? The girl's told repeatedly that she can trust no one except her mother, and that her mother is always right about everything. Yeah, her friends are seldom allowed in the house, and they're always viewed with suspicion. And every relatively normal example of young friends falling out is blown up to be an example of the mother's judgment being right and the friends being awful people. Now, as the girl grows older, she notices very quickly that her mother isn't actually, in fact, always right, and that she often blames the girl for things that are in no way the girl's fault. But any attempt by her to stand up for herself and explain why that would be the case is met with thunderous aggression. You know, she's told that she's ungrateful, untrustworthy, you know, self-centered, shallow, over and over again. You know, now we have the benefit of seeing that this is clear projection from the mother, but the girl can't. She internalizes it, and it now becomes part of her subconscious narrative. As she reaches her teens, like, it sits like this terrible secret within her that nobody is allowed to see. And in that act, vulnerability has gone into her shadow. You know, ironically, not because she was told not to trust, but because her mother proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that trusting anyone, including her, led inexorably to heartbreak and to pain. You know, issues of low self-esteem and low self-worth begin to bloom, and subconsciously she considers herself to be completely unworthy of any kind of love. Her ego, however, needs to find a way to keep her alive despite all that inner horror, and so she herself begins to project. Right? She judges everyone while constantly looking for the hidden judgment or outright lies in any neutral thing that anyone says to her. And she responds with, you know, absolute volcanic rage when she feels like she's been criticized. She will dismiss as vapid and shallow and self-absorbed anyone who takes care of themselves, while simultaneously maintaining a serious eating disorder so that she can control some tiny aspect of an otherwise uncontrollable existence that seems to be a magnet for traumatic experiences. You know, she'll struggle to understand intimacy in any meaningful way, and likely probably sabotages everything that's important to her. You know, all the while becoming bitter and resentful at the hand that life dealt her, you know, completely oblivious to the harms that she's causing other people in the process. Like she'll take no responsibility for herself or any of the situations she finds herself in adulthood, instead stuck in this victim mode, you know, blaming everyone else for her misfortunes. Now, the precise detail of her shadow may be different from her mother's, but it's in no way less present or destructive to herself or to other people. Another example, right? A child whose emotions are routinely glossed over in childhood but is praised for their academic achievements learns very quickly that validation comes from what they do rather than who they are. You know, the value of emotions is rejected, so is disavowed and buried in the shadow. You know, status and money, wealth, these become the sole barometer of self-worth. You know, their relationships are confusing and consistently fail because they place no value in intimacy and emotional reciprocity. They signal their financial status at every given opportunity and they judge people who do not achieve on their level as stupid or lazy. You know, their shadow is literally shrieking this fear that they have, that if they lost their status or their financial standing tomorrow, there would be nothing left of them, right? At least as far as their ego was concerned. A child who gets used to being referred to as an attention seeker, right, and hearing such things from a parent as, why do you think you're so special, or you're not nearly as important as you think you are, will eventually come to believe that they are in fact not special in any way. Anything that makes them stand out will actually feel to them as a threat and shameful. Like, they develop a fear of being seen, and they bury their uniqueness in their shadow. They'll reject compliments and likely form a distrust of anybody who actually offers those compliments in the first place. They might become an introvert, or could run even deeper than that. They could find that in some way that they can't quite pinpoint, they always seem to somehow sabotage their own achievements, or perhaps even develop a debilitating perfectionist streak. They secretly envy people who have the spotlight, but at the same time they'll simultaneously dismiss them as drama queens. Now, these are just but a few examples, but there's absolutely no reason why many of these or all of these might not apply simultaneously within the same person. Your shadow is not static, but a dynamic part of you that is constantly evolving, and in some cases growing even darker and more powerful as you continue so studiously to avoid it. Excuse me. It's possible, particularly in people who struggle with complex PTSD, right? It's possible to see the shadow coming from a myriad of different traumatic experiences that weave together to form a very dense and complex web of reactions and subconscious positioning. It's challenging but not impossible to work with. But to be honest, even if you don't have CPTSD, the likelihood is that there's not just one part of you tucked away in your shadow. You should expect the traits to be manifold and touch parts of your life that you actually had no idea were affected, right? Let's go back to the original example of that gentle and emotional little boy, but this time let's consider a different outcome for him, right? Instead of trying to emulate his father, this time the little boy builds up this resentment about the way that he's been treated, right? And he decides to himself that he will never be like his father, right? He'll never shame anyone or be aggressive towards them, right? He deliberately curates a persona of agreeableness, right? And he's mild-mannered in everything that he does. It's more important to him that he is liked and that he doesn't upset anyone, right? Now, there's absolutely no issue with being agreeable, but by doing it to an extreme, he has in his mind stripped of aggression of any ethical utility, right? And it's a matter of science fact that people who score very high in terms of agreeableness tend to struggle to advance their careers because they're not likely to ask for a raise or to push themselves out of their comfort zones and into new roles, right? And they also find it difficult to be entirely honest about their needs and wants in a relationship, which tends to leave them feeling quite resentful and uncared for. Sometimes the loving and authentic thing to do with someone is to risk incurring wrath by delivering straight up honesty. The buried aggression in the over agreeable character then leaks out as passive aggression, resentment, or even a little bit of a victim complex, eventually undermining whatever relationships they do have and leading to this sense of total powerlessness. And there are many avenues of life where aggression in its myriad expressions is actually a very useful state to use, to be able to use. Confidence, assertiveness, courage, bravery, general leadership qualities, like these all spring from an ability to use our aggression productively. Like professional sports people, right? They channel their aggression, harnessing the discipline and the competitiveness that comes from it to push their bodies to perform greater and greater physical feats. Martial arts and combat sports, another amazing examples of the ethical utility of aggression in your shadow. Like, yes, you are getting fit and learning to defend yourselves and all that sort of thing, but there's something else going on in your mind too. Like, knowing that you can physically fight rather counterintuitively has you less likely to be dragged into one, right? It'll find you harder to intimidate, more confident, and happier to articulate and advocate for what you need in any situation, whatever it is. It's taking the potential for chaos in aggression and ordering it into something that is helpful and useful to you and others. And notice that, right? Notice that balance between order and chaos and the moderate line that we are asked to traverse during, along the middle. I think Jordan Peterson put it really poetically in a live show of his that I watched once. He said, "Are you order or are you chaos? Or are you the process that mediates between the two?" Because if you are the process that mediates between them, then you are the thing that transforms. Like, we are the thing that voluntarily transforms. You can let things go if you know that there's more to come. Let's stick with aggression for a minute and drag in Nietzsche to help us hammer this out a little bit more, right? He was a philosopher from the 19th century, and he once said that morality is cowardice. Now, what he meant by that was not that every moral action was a cowardly one, but rather that most of what people claim to be moral virtue is actually something else. It is simply the fear of the consequences on them of doing something that society wouldn't like. It has nothing whatsoever to do with true morality and everything to do with fear of judgment. Now, if this statement triggers people, then good. It triggers a signposts to work that needs to be done. And shut the fucking window a moment. And it suggests that the type of morality that they are adhering to is one that is for public consumption rather than what they feel to be truly right. People who have examined and filtered their value system, right? Those who know that it comes from a place of authenticity within them will not rage at someone questioning them on it or judge someone else for making different choices from themselves because they have challenged themselves on it. The need for group identity is greatly diminished, and correspondingly the courage to step away from the herd when it's right to do so is greatly increased. Aggression supports courage. It supports assertiveness and confidence. We're talking, of course, about the development of true strength. It supports the ability to protect you and other people who may need your protection. It supports the application of will to situations that you might feel trapped by, and encourages you to push through the familiarity and safety of your comfort zone. It supports standing up and speaking your truth even if your voice shakes. It supports fighting for something that you believe in, even if everybody else tells you that you're wrong, I think culturally there's this false equivalency in the West where those who cloak their cowardice under the guise of virtue are seen to be the good guys, but the fact is that a harmless person isn't a moral person. They're mutually exclusive states. as Peterson put it, actually, you know, an axe murderer doesn't become a good guy just because he dropped his axe. A truly moral person has ready access to the malevolent energies within their character, but they understand that it can be controlled and channeled. They deny none of it within themselves and can draw upon that vital energy with discernment in the right way when circumstances necessitate, you know. A harmless person would allow all manner of creeping transgressions and trespasses to themselves and their loved ones and society in general, because they would be too afraid to stand up for themselves and rock the boat. That is not morality. Working with the shadow is not about eliminating the things that you are afraid of from your life. It's about making you bigger, making you more whole, making you more consciously able to direct your path. It enables you to better calculate like risk and reward, you know, to develop a sophisticated sense of discernment, because you are able to judge clearly the situation that is in front of you rather than responding to pre-programmed triggers. Now, about 3 days ago, when I started this video right here, that's what it feels like anyway. Feel like I've been here for days. I mentioned that it was possible to put not just your bad bits into your shadow, but your gold too. And I've alluded to that a number of times actually since. This golden shadow is your submerged creative potential, right? All the unique bits of you that you are now completely unaware of because somewhere along the line you failed to claim them. So here's a little anecdote, right? A couple of months ago, I was in a bit of a rut. I was really quite down on myself and suffering from what on reflection was probably a bit of a crisis of self-belief. I was talking to my friend, the same chaos magician actually that I referred to earlier, and I mentioned some of this to him, and he suggested this little exercise that he thought might help. He told me to sit down and really think about the person I wanted to be. You know, what qualities would I hold? And then to write them out as a list. I dutifully wrote them out, and I'm not afraid to say, just a little bit sadly as well, I made the list. And I messaged him to confirm that I'd done it. And he texted back one sentence. And it read, "That is you." Right? Now, my immediate gut reaction coming from my own shadow was, oh, what absolute fucking nonsense. But in spite of that initial slapdown from my own ego, I saw exactly what it was that he had guided me to. I had made a list of the valuable traits that I could see clearly in other people, but had completely disavowed in myself. I had scriven a list of my golden qualities without even realising it. Now, as an exercise, it probably won't pack the same punch for you as it did for me, because you know where it's going. But it could be a useful starting place for reflection nonetheless, you know. Just as we project the dark traits in our character, we also project the light, you know. Every single person that we have even a fleeting awareness of acts as a mirror to show us ourselves. And once you are aware of that fact, the way we understand the functioning of the world is changed. You know, just as that subconscious vigilance to the traits that we consider to be negative causes us to pull away from people who display them, that same vigilance experiences a magnetic pull towards those people who hold the qualities that we value. You know, those traits that you love in other people by definition exist in you too. You just can't see it. You know, no matter what type of quality we hide, the process of disavowal is the same. And at the point that it happened, we knew no better. But at this stage of the journey, already having begun the process of integrating our darkness, we are so much more able to accept a truth that has eluded us for so long. The truth being that we are so much more than we have ever allowed ourselves to hope that we could be. so much bigger, so much brighter, capable of true fulfillment, capable of pure compassion, capable of both being loved and loving. That in our own way, we shine. We are special. We are all charged with a spark of greatness that is just waiting for our individual consent to share it with the world. But it has to come from you. During the course of sitting with the themes that I've presented to you here, it's become really clear to me that not only is consent important, it's actually critical to spiritual development, right? It's the linchpin of our power as spiritual beings living a fleeting human existence. Everything revolves around the power of your consent. When you were a child, this isn't something that was available to you. You were dependent and vulnerable, inexperienced and incapable. You were taught that compliance was a virtue, and as a child, that possibly was true to a lesser or greater extent. But for us, right here, right now, as humans on this planet, the process of true maturation isn't aging. It's reclamation of the self. And that can only come by taking responsibility for the self. And you can't take responsibility for the self if you don't own every shred of what makes you what you are. You take responsibility by owning your mistakes and consenting to learn from them without feeling diminished by the process. You take responsibility by consenting to be comfortable with everything about you that is unique and non-standard, without agonizing over whether this impresses or disgusts people around you. You do this by coming to Sonder, which is the realization that each and every passerby is living life as vivid and complex as your own, and knowing that these people are all just trying to make it through, no less than you, no more than you, but special, just as you are. You take responsibility by consenting to love yourself so naturally that doubt or fear of judgment are energies that are starved of fuel, and as a result cease to be the guides that you use to navigate your experiences. But most of all, you consent to be a creature of integrity, where your pure self at the center is what you consent to allow others to see by way of your thoughts, your words, your actions. The inner and outer worlds now finally connected. Alignment, integration, wholeness. You want healing. You want love. You want meaning and purpose to fill your soul and to spill out from the very core of you. You want to understand the true nature of the painful and traumatic experiences that you've had. You want to lose the fear that's been nipping at your ankles for decades. You want to know what it is to truly stand in your integrity and authenticity. And this, my loves, is the path. Nietzsche once wrote, there are heights of the soul from which even tragedy ceases to look tragedy, and I feel that. I feel that in every cell of my being, because in the discovery of our authentic selves, tragedy reveals itself as the most profound of teachers, a gift. Experiential lessons are finally understood. Pouring forgiveness and compassion into ourselves opens up the ability to extend that to others. Now, one of Jung's defining ideas was that of the collective unconscious, right? The part of the unconscious mind which comes from ancestral memory and experience, and it's common to all humankind. It's distinct from your individual consciousness, unconscious rather, and sighted so much deeper. This idea holds that behind the level of the public mask and the shadow and even the pure self, there is a collective reservoir of consciousness where the illusion of separation is dispelled, and where the potential for humanity's collective spiritual development is stored. He said, the collective unconscious holds the whole spiritual heritage of mankind's evolution, born anew in the brain structure of every individual. You know, when we talk about raising humanity's consciousness, this is the bar that we are attempting to raise. And this is why I always place so much emphasis on the importance of personal work, because that which we fix in ourselves, we fix in the collective. The collective is outside of us, yes, but it is also inside of us. If we can just clear the white noise and the static that is sitting over the top, born anew in the brain structure of every individual. As it happens, I actually disagree with you on that detail, because I don't recognise my consciousness as being seated in my brain. It actually feels like it sits around here. Anyway, we cannot effect change collectively for the benefit of the individual. We have to effect change individually for the benefit of the collective. You know, find the path back to the collective unconscious through ourselves and change ourselves to raise humanity. The world needs pure compassion, pure forgiveness, not the weaponized, fearful and angry, inverted bullshit facsimiles of compassion and forgiveness that are currently masquerading as such in our society. Instead, we need the core of these qualities, immaculate and unconditional. And you start by applying them to yourself. Yeah? Be the change that you wish to see in the world. So, when, as I do on this channel often, I ask, who are you? I'm not asking for your name. I'm not asking for your job or your age or your gender or your sexual orientation or any of the descriptors we use to identify ourselves to others. Do you know what? It's not even a question I need an answer to. It's a prompt. I am asking you to begin a process of personal exploration to identify what of you is that sliver that Bly spoke of. I'm asking you to invest time and care and effort and thought into expanding that sliver, expanding yourselves, expanding your consciousness, dedicating yourself to it like it was the most important thing you'll ever do. Because likely it is. Solve et coagula. Thank you for listening. Know that I love you all very, very much. And I will see you soon.